Imagine you are burying a broken glass in the woods. In one possible future, 1 year from now, a child steps on the glass and hurts herself. In another possible future, 100 years from now, a child steps on the glass and hurts herself just as much. Instinctively, we might think that protecting the child in the first case is more important than protecting her in the second. If we think about it, though, we realize both situations are bad. Why should we dismiss the consequences of our actions only because they will take more time to be effective? Today, we'll try to answer this question by discussing long-termism, the idea according to which positively influencing the long-term future is a moral priority of our time. Imagine an old friend of yours is going through a rough patch and wants to talk to you on the phone. You thought you were living in the same country, but during the call you find out they are traveling to another continent. Will you be less inclined to help them just because they are distant? Of course not. Physical distance has no influence on your feelings towards your friend or the value you assign to their well-being. But if people matter equally regardless of where they live, shouldn't they also matter regardless of when they live? We all want our children and grandchildren to live their best life, even before they are born. The example of the child in the woods shows that that sentiment can be extended to include generation after generation in the distant future. From the point of view of your ancestors, you were once a future person. Many generations separate them from you, so many, in fact, that you don't even think about it. Still, here you are, alive and well. Your joys and sorrows are as real and important as those of the generation that came before you. Well, people in the future will feel the same way when they compare the value of their lives to yours. Would you accept that your life matters less than those of your ancestors, only because you were born a couple of centuries after them? If the answer is no, then can you really claim that your life has more value than those of your descendants, only because you were born a couple of centuries before them? Alright, so from a moral point of view, future people might matter more than we'd like to admit. It's clear that the more lives we can positively influence with our actions, the more important it is we do so. But how many people are we talking about exactly? It's impossible to give a definitive answer, but even discounting sci-fi future in which we colonize the galaxy, it just takes a bit of reasoning to realize that the vast majority of human beings might have yet to be born. Therefore, the vast majority of everything that matters in life, like happiness, beauty, knowledge, and so on, will be enjoyed more by generation further into the future than that of our grandchildren. The typical mammalian species survives on average for about 1 million years. Our species, Homo sapiens, has so far lasted for about 300,000 years. Therefore, we can expect our civilization to last for another 700,000 years. We are not a typical mammalian species though. We have the technological means to prevent and recover from anything that might threaten our extinction. Unless we commit suicide by being the cause of our own extinction, we could last far longer. Indeed, Earth will be habitable for several hundreds million of years. If humankind survives for just 1% of that time, there will be roughly 500,000 generations after ours. That is, at least 1 billion lives, 10,000 times the number of human beings who have ever lived until today. The scale of this future is too difficult to comprehend. When we think about numbers that are too large, they all sound the same. We have talked about this in this video. The survival of humankind in this vast future is desirable only if said future is good. Fortunately, there are good reasons to suspect that this future will not only be desirable, but even extraordinarily good. We have already made astonishing progress. The percentage of people living in extreme poverty fell from around 90% in 1820 to less than 10% in 2015. And absolute numbers are declining too. Within the same period, child mortality fell from over 40% to less than 5%, and the number of people living in a democracy increased from less than 1% to the majority of people in the world. Further progress is possible, and we can hope that further scientific and medical breakthroughs will keep on improving our lives in the future. We are still a long way from rid ourselves of problems like extreme poverty, injustice, animal suffering, and devastation caused by climate change. Highlighting the scope of positive futures we might reach doesn't mean ignoring today's problems. On the contrary, fully appreciating how wonderful the future might be motivates us to work on it. It means the urgent problems of our time don't have to be perennial. If things go well, solving them now could mean solving them forever. Unfortunately, we also have to admit that the future might be bad, perhaps characterized by stagnation or a particularly stable totalitarian regime, or conflicts. This is no reason to give up on protecting the long-term future. On the contrary, noticing that the future might be very bad should make the opportunity to improve it seem even more significant. Surely preventing tragedies and future hardships is just as important as making positive futures come true. As we have explained in another video, which you can find at this link, the time we are living in might be just the first page in the history of humankind. This is not an abstract theory. The decisions we make today can have a huge impact on future generations, from the child walking in the wood a year from now, to the human being that will live on this planet 1,000 years or more from now. We must carefully think about the consequences of these decisions, because they may be the reason our descendants will live in peace and prosperity, or conversely, in a dystopian and afflicted world. A clear example of how we can influence the future is climate change. We now know beyond reasonable doubt that human activities disrupt the climate on Earth, that climate change will have devastating effects, and that some of these effects might last for a long time, even for thousands of years. But we also know we can control how much damage we can do and how we can reduce it. For example, by putting more effort in developing green technologies and by using more energy sources with a low environmental impact. Unfortunately, climate change is not the only existential risk we will have to face. Humankind's potential is threatened by nuclear weapons, engineered pandemics, and future developments in artificial intelligence. We will talk about the concept of existential risk in future videos. For now, it's important to keep in mind that working today to avoid such catastrophes make it more likely for thousands of future generations to live. It's a clear example, though not the only one, of how we can have a positive impact on the long-term future. So far, we have seen that, from a moral point of view, future generations could matter as much as our own. It's easy to accept this idea because it's not immediately clear how taking it seriously could influence our life. It's natural to assume that there is nothing we can do to improve the lives of people that won't be born for thousands or millions of years. However, as we have seen, when we reflect on this moment in history, it becomes clear that we have the means to influence the long-term future, or even determine whether future generations will exist or not. If we combine these observations with the fact that our future may be incomparably more vast, then it's evident that positively influencing the future is one of the most important and significant things we can do. This is the underlying principle of long-termism. It's understandable to react by thinking that these ideas are too weird or too similar to science fiction. Of course, it's not necessary to find all this convincing to appreciate some aspects of long-termism. Long-termism is not a single, narrow view on what exactly we should give priority to and why. On the contrary, its scope is broad because it can and must tie together all kinds of research. At the same time, we shouldn't dismiss these ideas because they sound bizarre. Moral ideas that seem avant-garde in the past, such as abolishing slavery, giving women the right to vote, and treating non-human animals with respect, are now discussed every day. These topics are discussed in more details in What We Owe the Future, William MacAskill's new book. You can find the link in the description. MacAskill is a philosophy professor at Oxford and one of the founders of Effective Altruism, a global movement that uses rationality to improve the world as much as possible. What We Owe the Future explains how you can positively influence humanity's future, and how all of us, together, can create a better world for the thousands or millions of generations to follow. Of course, we are still unsure about the best ways to make sure all will be well in the future. One thing is clear though. We can make decisions right now to help future generations. Long-termism suggests we shouldn't give to this uncertainty, but rather we should find ways to improve the long-term future. The choice we make now could determine what kind of future humanity will have. Dystopia or utopia? The choice is ours, perhaps the most important decision we can take.